Welcome back. We are back for Circle of Knowledge Part 6, where I continue to explain this circle, what are all these words, where do they come from, and how did they get there. And on the last part, Part 5, we were talking about the other words that were around the outside of the circle in sixteenths. So in Part 4, we kind of said that for each eighth of the circle, you could have like, this is the space eighth, this is the earth eighth, according to physics, or according to chemistry, this is the inorganic eighth, and this is the organic eighth. According to biology, this is the plants, and this is the animals. But then we went further, and I said, well, when you really start to place all these other subtle words, you start noticing that there's even other generalizations that emerge from each section, and that there's kind of a nice words that just sum up that whole area. Maybe not exactly, but it gives you the sense of what's going on in that 16th. So last time we were talking about this 16th is all about space. This is all about structure. This 16th is a lot about information. This 16th is about reference. And so these words on the outside give you a quick tell of what's going on roughly in that 16th of the circle. So I haven't talked about all the large generalization words outside yet, or the colors, or the kind of alchemical things going on here. And there's a few other words that I haven't mentioned on the outside, so I'm going to start with those first, though. You'll notice there's words just like these 16, or just like the core and heart words. There's two more words right near each of these main 8 topics. So what are those words? Well, over the years while I was making this, I kind of just found certain trends and things that I thought were fun at the moment, and I challenged myself to find certain words that met certain requirements at one point. And over time, a few of them made it to this chart. And so one of the things I did for myself, that's not how I want to say it, but one of the things I did at one point was I said, well, I kept coming up with these words that ended in tion, shun words. And I said, I wonder if I can find a shun word that represents each of the 8 main topics. So you'll notice, for example, here by physics, physics is all about foundations. So that ends in tion, foundations. And I said, oh, I wonder if I can get a that word for each one. So what you're seeing here with these tion words, you'll notice that there's a tion word by each of the main 8 pillar topics. That is kind of like the core words, but a shun version. So physics is about wave and particles. Or if somebody said, well, what is physics to me about? And I'd say, oh, it's about foundations of stuff, foundations of the universe. But physics is your foundations of everything. It's the mechanics, it's the engineering, it's the material, it's the root of kind of how things work, and it's your foundation. So foundations is physics. And then we're going to go through these quick. And then what is chemistry about? Chemistry is about transitions. And if you think about it, that's what chemistry is about. All the elements and how they transition between each other. How can you convert them? How do they interact? And like I said in the last video, when you go from inorganic to organic, you notice that things, as they start to get towards life, have to have a way to propagate or grow or move. And at the heart of it, chemistry is about transitions. And so physics is foundation. But now that we've got our foundation, how does it transit? And chemistry is all about the transitions of that foundation, if you want to think about it that way. So now I'm just going to go through these now that you see what's going on here. So then, foundation, transition is more basic level, but now you get to proliferations. And not just to how the chemicals transit between each other, maybe some chemical interactions, but how does it actually go forth and grow and proliferate itself as a being or as an organism or as a pile of chemicals or whatever. You'll notice that biology is all about proliferating, life, and you'll even see the word life, proliferation. I got a cat coming up on the desk, so hold on a minute. I gotta kind of shuffle him. Hi, buddy. So biology is about proliferations. And how does life go forward? Okay. Psychology is all about cognitions. And cognitions kind of catches that cognitive science. How are you actually aware? But by making it cognitions too, it's like, well, what are the thoughts that you have? And so I feel like the word cognitions really kind of captures what psychology is about. You've got foundations, transitions, proliferations, and cognitions. Okay. What's sociology about? Well, that's an easy one. Civilizations. So my shun word for sociology is civilization. And sociology is about civilizations. Okay. Arts and crafts are about creations. You create a piece of art, you create something in crafts. It's all about what you're creating and what you're making. What is that animal or that creature that's come over here and it's mastered some of this physics and foundations and chemistry? What is it doing with it? What is it making? What is it creating? So here is arts and crafts are about creations. And okay. So what is symbols, or what is symbology about? Symbology is about expressions. How do you express something in terms of something else? That's a symbol for it. And on the one side, it's more about reference and what are you referring to, and on the other side, it's more about aesthetic and entertainment and how just are you expressing yourself, poetry and folklore and dance and stuff. But in general, symbols are about expressing something symbolically. It's an expression of something else. So the symbology is about expressions, and I think I let myself cheat on that one, or I didn't notice that that's not a tion, but it's an sion. So I'm just noticing that now, and I'm like, why did I not catch that earlier? Or did I did. I would have noticed it or thought about it. I think maybe I just let myself slide on that one. I'll have to think about that or come back to it. But so symbology is about expressions. And lastly, language and math is about formalizations. So, you're formalizing. How do you speak? What are the words? What are the sentences? What are the semantics? What is the math? You're making it formal. You're not just expressing it. You're making it very, very technical and very logical and very analytical, and you're formalizing it. And you could say that language and math is formalizations. Okay, great. So now that we did those, you'll notice at the same place, I'm going to go around again. One of my challenges was to do a shun word for each of the 8. And at another point, and this one took me a lot longer. Only some of this next one, even as the last version of the chart, like a year or two ago, they weren't right. I only had 4 or 5 of the 8. I didn't have them all right. They were in terrible locations, so forth and so on. But at one point, I had challenged myself to come up with an ence word, an ence word for each topic. Because I had just noticed certain patterns, and when I was jotting this stuff down on paper, I kept seeing certain words appear, and I said, I wonder if there's an ence word for each. And it was just kind of a frivolous challenge to myself, and it took me a long time to kind of hone in on ence words that I thought were good enough or that really fit a location. Excuse me. But the same thing now, you'll notice physics is about existence. Chemistry is about coalescence. Again, kind of how do these things pool or come together? How do the chemicals work? But chemistry is about coalescence and things coming together. Biology is about emergence. And of course, you'll notice a connection between like existence and foundation is very similar, or emergence and proliferate. So you're kind of expressing a shun word in terms of an ence word, or an ence word in terms of a shun word. But this was just kind of wordsmithing at this point and trying to come up with generalizations that I said, you know what, this captures that whole area kind of. And it does. This area is about emergence. And psychology is about sentience. And sociology is about coexistence. Right? It's like over here, physics is existence, but here's coexistence. And it's nice that they're opposite of each other. And influence we talked about before on the last one, because it was also kind of like, made logical sense from affluence, which also just happens to be an ence word that ended up here. Partially because I had a lot of these ence words at one point, and I was filtering them to where they go or where they don't go and whatnot. But arts and crafts are about influence. A lot of it. And let's see. Symbology is about quintessence. And quintessence is not a word that everybody's familiar with. And I didn't have the definition memorized, but as I kept looking for ence words and I honed in on it, it made sense. Quintessence is kind of like I don't want to say essence again, but it's kind of is in there. Quintessence. It's the essence of something. It's the core abstraction or example of that thing in a category, And so the symbol is that. It's the quintessence of symbols. Symbology is kind of about the quintessence of things. There's a very similarity between symbology and quintessence. And then lastly up here, language and math is about inference. And, information and formalized it. And how do you infer something from a logic standpoint? And because now you've not only codified something in symbols, made it very formal, you're actually using those symbols to then say something back about that natural world or whatever you're modeling or whatever you're creating a system of. You're inferring from those symbols, because if the symbols, and your formalizations of them captured the reality accurately enough, then maybe noticing something between those symbols and how they interact or what you can do with them and your logic system will then say something about reality that you hadn't noticed, that you can infer. So language and math is a lot about inference. So anyway, that's what those words were. Now we've covered all the words around the outside. We've covered the 8 pillars. We've covered how we create these words in the middle, how we create these generalizations in the middle, what the 8ths and 16ths kind of generally are. And we haven't talked about every single word in here because, again, they're just categories that you start to fill in over time. And I can get into why certain ones are where. That's more like that one thing I said. If I go back and show people the logic that I used over time, if you go look at the previous examples, it makes it a lot easier to say, oh, well, why did I move this here? And what did you notice here? And, oh, okay. But for now, I'm going to leave it at this. Let me check my time. And say, okay, that's kind of the generalizations around the outside. So the next part of the circles where I think it really starts to get interesting is what are these larger generalizations and what about the alchemical things and the color? And this is where some really neat, what's the word I want? Some really neat correspondence starts to happen that I think it's uncanny in a sense. So I'm anxious to finish up this video, and I might just keep this one short and then start with that for the next one. The last 2 videos were a little over 20 minutes, and this one we're at 12 or 13. I want to keep it under 15 or 20. But maybe I can just lead into it a little bit, or allude to it, and maybe start, and I'll just pick it up in that and the next one in part 6, or what part are we on? This is 6. Oh gosh, I gotta check real quick. No, this is 6 we're doing now. Okay, and so let's see here. So I'm just collecting my thoughts for a minute because I'm doing this on the cuff, and I'm not sure in my head if I want to go on or make another one. Let me hem and haw over it for a second. I guess I'll start with a little bit, but then I'll end up just repeating myself, and I'll finish this one off in a minute or two, and then I'll really get into it in the next video. I think that's going to be best. So the next thing is, once I had this system, and we said this whole system started just with noticing natural law and noticing some natural flow on scale from physics to chemistry to biology to psychology, and then realizing the human side of it and going into these others and coming back around to no scale and language and math and this circle that we have. I started to notice other correspondences over time. This is one of the earliest ones. And coming from a bit of a mystery school or alchemical background at one point, of course, the 4 elements came to mind. And I asked myself, well, where would I put the elements on this chart just out of fun and curiosity? I said, where do the elements go? And I think I'll talk about this more. I'll leave off here with this and talk about this more in the next video because I could just start to get into it, and I can tell it's just going to dive right into it. But you notice that, okay, the four traditional elements in most systems are earth, air, fire, and water, right? And of course, there's other systems that have things with spirit and wood and metal, and okay, we're going to get to that. But the general old system is air, earth, water, fire. And if I said to myself, where do they go? I have to try to associate them on the chart. I know that I'm working in eighths and that there's 4 of those, and so I want them to be evenly spaced. So then I challenge you, where would you place earth, fire, wind, and water on the chart? And over time, or rather, like I said, rather rapidly actually, I noticed that they kind of just fit in. And I said, well, there's a lot of sense to why, like that they do kind of correspond to somewhere on the circle. And at first I hemmed and hawed. Is Earth more about physics or chemistry? And does it go here? If you look at some of the original charts, they might have been like offset. They were still catty-quarter from each other or in quarters. But it took a little while for them to settle in their exact place. And I'm going to get into this in the next one. But you'll notice that, and I'm going to leave it here and we'll get into this. Let me check the time. Yeah, we're going to leave it here and get into it in the next one. But I'll finish with this. You'll notice that Earth does correspond to chemistry. Chemistry is all about chemicals in the Earth. And yeah, we have space in Earth here, but Earth as in matter. And chemistry is all about the matter and the chemicals and how do they interact and the material. We're going to get into this. But chemistry is about your Earth. This is the material, the Earth. And psychology is water. Water is usually associated with the emotions and feelings and the waters of the mind, and things like that. And so psychology is the water. And arts and crafts is all about fire. The original crafts and everything was start a fire, do blacksmithing. You need fire for energy and to produce. You're making products and creations out of the fire. Fire is the evolution of the man from just the gatherer into, he can cook his food or have a village and start civilization and have, stay in one place and create agriculture and stuff like that. But fire ends up being, and I'm going to get into this a lot more in the next one, to why these end up where they are. But fire is like the trades and your expression and aesthetics and things that are very outward, that fiery, sports or music or actor energy or something like that. And air is your language and math. Air is traditionally, it's kind of like things that are etheric or, the ethereal, or it's the no scale. It's just the empty space. And that's kind of like language and math. They're just abstractions that you use. And air is usually associated with thoughts and wisdom and intellect and the wise. And that's all your mathematicians and your language people and your writers and your... Okay, so we're going to leave it with that on this one. And we'll start the next one with this alchemical discussion of the generalizations of the bigger words and the elements and stuff on the outside. What are these secondary elements? Where did they come from? And I think we'll leave it there. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed some talk about this infographic on the circle of knowledge. And we're going to get into the parts that I find the most interesting now, which is some of what can you do with the circle and what are these neat things that over time I noticed more and more things start to fit this. And we haven't even brushed the surface yet. But we're going to, and we'll get into that. So thanks for listening. I'll end it there. And I hope to see you guys next time for some more discussion on the circle of knowledge.